All right, we are live with the webinar, the EUKN-OECD opening session of the National Week of Urban Policies. In a few seconds, the YouTube streaming is also live, and it is indeed. So I'll Yes, and I heard myself twice, so I switched off the YouTube channel, but that works indeed. So welcome on behalf of the EUKN. My name is Martin Grizel. I will be your co-moderator of today, together with Aziza Akmouche, who will present herself in a second. We would like to welcome you to this opening session of what we named a full week of national urban policies. And this week actually started already last week with a wonderful presentation of the OECD report on national urban policies that was launched this Friday. And we are extremely happy to work together with the OECD on this event. We have been discussing our collaboration on this important topic of national urban policies for many years, and we're really happy that we find a very good opportunity with this, the publication of this report, to actually do so. And as you will hear from us during today's session, but also the other sessions, this is only the beginning of a more intense cooperation on national urban policies. Let me start with a few technical announcements. This webinar will be recorded. The participants already approved so. And it will be live streamed also. We have a huge interest from many people across the globe for this webinar. And if you cannot manage to watch it via the Zoom webinar, you will be able to watch it via our YouTube EUKN channel. For those of you who are able to read the chat in Zoom, you will find the link in the chat. And otherwise, just go to the YouTube EUKN-EGTC YouTube channel to find the right channel for this broadcast. This is a webinar. That means that the panelists are only visible and audible, but the audience can participate in different ways. We have polls to ask you, but you're also able to ask questions in the Q&A. You can even upvote questions in this Q&A that Aziza Akmouche and I will have a look at to ask questions to the panelists in the second round of, or in the follow-up rounds of discussions that we will have. And with that, I would like to just announce you that if you have any technical issues, please send an email to the info@eukn.eu email address. My colleagues will give you a reply to answer any technical issues that you might have. And with that, I would like to give the floor to my co-moderator, who is Aziza Akmouche, who will present herself working at the OECD. Aziza, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Martin, and dear guests, welcome to all of you, dear panelists. It's really my pleasure to say a few words in the opening of this beautiful week on national urban policy that, as you rightly said, Martin, started back in Friday. And I'll come back to some of the takeaways of the global state of national urban policy that we launched together with UN Habitat and Cities Alliance. I'm Aziza Akmouche. I'm heading at the OECD the division that works on cities, urban policy, and sustainable development. And I must say that we're really glad and proud to be hosting this joint set of policy labs with the European Urban Knowledge Network. We've been working with Martin, Sabrina and their team for a few years now, joining forces, but it's really nice to see how this can crystallize in a joint set of gathering, because the topic of national urban policy has never been so timely and relevant. And it's actually interesting for us to see how much traction this concept of national urban policy has gained over the past year and a half, 2 years, and the impetus that the new Leipzig Charter has given to it, because we all know, many of us around this table, that national urban policy is actually not a new concept. Many of us have been, long before the pandemic, recognizing that there is a big role for national governments to play to enable cities of all sizes to thrive and contribute to national prosperity and growth. We've many of us been advocating for a more quality, polycentric and balanced urbanization that doesn't rely only on large metropolitan areas, but that also drives this rural-urban linkage, which we know is at the core of the national urban policy concept. Many of us have been very vocal that a national urban policy is not just a national housing policy. And I think this need over the years to have really ambitious integrated national urban policy that can cut across different sectors and help us face the challenges of tomorrow that many of cities of all size, by the way, are going to face is extremely timely and relevant now. We've seen also how this concept of national urban policy has gained a lot of traction with Habitat 3, and more recently with the follow-up activities to the new urban agenda, whether we're talking about different types of global and regional agendas that were developed, the Paris Climate Agreement, but also the Sustainable Development Goals, with a dedicated goal 11 devoted to cities and communities, where we have some qualifiers that relate to national urban policy and can set the right incentives for national governments to get this right. And what we've seen more recently with this COVID-19 crisis is the extent to which a number of the paradigm shifts that we are observing in OECD countries, and as you know, 2/3 of OECD countries are actually European countries, are basically being accelerated somehow by this health crisis, whether we're talking about the digital revolution and how mid-sized cities have a big card to play today. And this holds implications for national urban policy, because in this era of teleworking, where somehow the spatial equilibrium may be slightly shaken, there is a need to keep really this polycentric and balanced urbanization. We've seen a second paradigm shift around this transition from a logics of mobility to one of accessibility, with many concepts, the 10-minute city, the 15-minute city, the 20-minute city, depending on where you are refocusing on the need for more proximity to essential urban services and amenities, and are already affecting the way we are designing our cities. We're reclaiming public space, we're regulating land use, we're delivering public services, and there as well, national urban policies have a big role to play to maintain that territorial cohesion and to ensure that those 10, 15, 20-minute cities remain actually connected to their surroundings. And we've seen, last but not least, a third paradigm shift towards a lot more environmental awareness from citizens and urban dwellers, probably because the pandemic has magnified the consequences of environmental degradation on health, resulting in this awareness, and also showing that there is probably today a unique momentum that is making many of the solutions to tackle the climate and health crisis together probably a bit more acceptable politically and socially than they were in the past. And that's why we've been looking in particular in recent years how national urban policies help connect the urban and climate communities and deliver this scale up of climate action that we need. So that's why Friday we launched this Global State of National Urban Policy 2021. This is the second edition of this global monitoring that is covering 162 countries worldwide, that is basically looking at the form, the scope, the stage of development of national urban policies worldwide, that is linking it for this special edition with the Sustainable Development Goals, the new urban agenda, the Paris Climate Agreement, based on country surveys and on-the-ground evidence. And that is equally important, shaping 10 high-level recommendations recommendations to help policymakers design and implement better national urban policies that can really help cities address those long-standing challenges that relate to inequality, globalization and its discontent, climate change, the future of work in this era of digitalization and so on. And so we hope this report will be actually a critical source of information, a joint undertaking with UN Habitat and Cities Alliance, as I was saying earlier, that we think, and that will be my last word, can be also a very powerful vehicle to support the implementation of the new Leipzig Charter, because the arrival of this new charter is also very timely. The way it is advocating for place-based, integrated, functional approach, the way it's paying attention to the appropriate spatial scales of policy action, the need to actually integrate economic, social, and environmental policy objectives, and digitalization not as a threat, but as an opportunity is very aligned. It's actually the same language we've been conveying in the OECD principles on urban policy and what our member countries have been saying over the past 20 years of urban work at the OECD. So we're really delighted to kick off this session today. We'll have more specific thematic focuses over the coming 2 to 3 days, but we look forward to hearing from many of the distinguished panelists today and also from all of you in the Q&A, and it will be really my pleasure going forward to continue with Martin and his team to tap into each other's fields of expertise, to learn from new ideas and to share our knowledge on this issue. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Welcome again to all of you, and over to you, Sabrina, for the opening remarks.
Thank you, Aziza. Welcome to all the participants and hi to my colleagues. I'm really happy to welcome you on behalf of EUKN-EGTC. EUKN is a network of member states in Europe working together on urban matters. It supports national governments by providing knowledge on sustainable urban development and by facilitating cooperation and exchanges between member states on this issue. It had shown its role by contributing to the establishment of strategic urban agendas, such as the Urban Agenda for the EU, adopted in 2016 under the Dutch presidency, the new Urban Agenda adopted in the same year in Quito, and the new Leipzig Charter adopted last November under the German presidency. Those strategic agendas brings recommendation and contribute to national urban policies that have real impact on cities and their citizens. We are really glad that EUKN and the OECD have joined forces on this topic. As it was said, this week was already launched last Friday with the OECD publication Global State of National Urban Policies 2021. Both the OECD and the EUKN see national urban policies as key instruments to achieve sustainable urban development in a shared responsibility across countries, regions, and cities. The week focuses on national urban policies and its implementation in Europe. The new Leipzig Charter re-emphasizes the importance of powerful national urban policy frameworks as the new Urban Agenda of 2016. Those policies are an integral part of the multi-level governance systems. They bridge the local and regional level on the one hand, and the transnational and intergovernmental level on the other hand. They can create a level playing field, allowing all stakeholders, including civil society and the private sector, to work together and find solutions to the challenges of today, as climate change and post-COVID recovery, to name just one of the two urgent global challenges. By agreeing upon the new Leipzig Charter, the European Ministers for Urban Matters stressed the transformative power of cities. This transformation is based on the integration of the social, ecological, and economical dimension of sustainable urban development. And this transformation is translated by the just city, the green city, and the productive city. This interconnected dimension of the city also constitutes the conceptual framework for the discussion during our week. During these days, we will explore how national urban policies support the three dimensions of the city in thematic sessions. But first, we will start the opening session. It will provide a general introduction and will prepare the ground for the three following thematic sessions. We originally planned the EUKN-OECD Week of National Urban Policy as a conference under the Portuguese presidency. And therefore, I'm really honored to give the floor to our host, Mr. Eduardo Pinheiro, Secretary of State for Mobility at the Portuguese Ministry for the Environment and Climate Action, to welcome you on behalf of the Portuguese presidency. Please, Mr. Secretary of State Pinheiro, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sabrina. I'd like to welcome you all. It's an honor. As you said, I'm Secretary of State for Mobility of the Portuguese government. And I would like to say a few words. It's an honor for me on behalf of the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the European Union on this week of national urban policies. As has been said by Sabrina, the National Leipzig Charter adopted at the last informal meeting of the ministers responsible for urban matters was really a key milestone in the cooperation on urban matters in Europe. Similar to the principles for urban policy developed by OECD, this strategy places a significant relevance on good urban governance, outlining a basic set of principles: urban policy for the common good, integration, participation, and co-creation, multi-level governance, and place-based approach. Building on this milestone, and in close cooperation with our trio partners, the Portuguese presidency assumed the implementation of the new Leipzig Charter as its main priority. During the last months, we steered, with the support of EUKN, an intense co-creative and multi-level process with the active participation of the member states, European institutions and cities, to debate and deliberate to the future of the urban agenda for the EU and to take a step forward towards the agreement foreseen to take place in November this year in Ljubljana. But looking into the future of cities and urban development, we need to take the impetus of recovery to build a more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive future. The desired urban transformation outlined in the new Leipzig Charter is grounded in the idea of balancing and integrating the social, ecological, and economic dimensions of sustainable development, synthesized on three dimensions of the European cities: just, green, and productive, complemented by the cross-cutting dimension of digitalization. This vision of balanced and integrated transformation of cities and regions will only be successfully achieved with the cooperation of governmental and non-governmental actors from all levels and sectors. We are all gathered here today to focus on the national urban policies. This week of national urban policies responds to our need to informal intergovernmental cooperation on urban matters in Europe. Member states and their partners want to exchange even more what good urban policy means for them in their cities and in what way the approaches of national urban policies vary across countries. Among all the principles and proposed lines of action outlined in the new Leipzig Charter, I like to highlight the importance of ensuring powerful national urban policies. These are key to put in practice not only the European shared vision and strategic framework for sustainable urban development, but also the Sustainable Development Goals, the European Green Deal, the Paris Agreement, and other European and national instruments, as well as to pursue the general welfare, reliable and accessible public service of general interest, and reduce all forms of social, economic, environmental, and territorial inequalities. National urban policies should act as platforms of dialogue and enable exchanges of experience and knowledge between national, regional, and local levels. They should also support this development and provision of funding programs and incentive for innovation and experimental projects that address the challenges of sustainable urban development. In Portugal, this is already reflected in the National Spatial Planning Policy Program. The strategic instrument establishes the major options of the organization of the entire national territory. It is an instrument of cooperation with the other member states for the organization of the territory of the European Union. At the national level, its strategic and operational framework plays a fundamental role as a territorial reference for urban policy, cohesion policy, and all the sectoral policies with territorial impact, as well as for the 2030 National Investment Program. The event that we are now opening will certainly be an opportunity to learn from one another's experiences, draw lessons, and identify good practice to improve national urban policies. The new Leipzig Charter outlines a basic set of principles of good governance, which provides a great frame for discussing urban policies across different countries. This discussion is critical in this special moment and challenging period. The disruptive transformations that the COVID-19 pandemic brought to our society will undoubtedly change how we'll tackle the global challenge and pursue these shared objectives to urban development. As the motto of the OECD states, we need better policies for better lives. Today, and in the following 2 days, we will investigate together what do national urban policies mean for the new Leipzig Charter and vice versa, and how can the principles guiding good urban policy be fostered globally? What can we learn from each other when openly discussing our urban policies in a real peer learning setting? To conclude, I'd like to thank the organizers, the EUKN and the OECD, for promoting this conference. And it's my wish that this week discussions will carry substance and take a step forward in the preparation of better national urban policies to make the most of the transformative power of cities for the common good and realize European and global agreements at the urban scale. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Secretary of State Pinheiro, to give an introduction to the importance of national urban policies, also in relation to the new Leipzig Charter, which was adopted end of November last year under the German presidency. This indeed is also the topic of the first round of discussion that we will have today with our panelists, followed by a discussion, more in-depth discussion on the importance of national urban policies as such. And then we'll also have a look into the future of national urban policies, which seem to gain in importance, as was also recently proved, by the way, by the publication of the OECD report on national urban policies. But before we start, and before I will introduce the panelists of today and hand over to my co-moderator, Aziza Abmouche, I would like to know a bit better also the composition of our audience today. And for that, we have prepared a poll that I will show to you now. And the question is, you will see the poll now live. What kind of organization you represent? And there are different possibilities at different levels, international organizations, national levels, both within the EU and outside the EU, different regional levels in the EU, outside the EU, or local levels, academia, consultancy, or otherwise. I will wait a few more seconds before everyone actually has answered the poll. I do suppose you don't have any identity crises, so this answering this poll will be relatively simple. All right, I don't see. Okay, I see that still our people are still voting. We're now at. We have a very active audience today, Aziza. I see that. I mean, almost 80% of our audience has actually participated in the poll, which I will end now in 2 more seconds. And we are indeed almost at 80%. So what do we see? Aziza, I will also show share the results with you so that we can both have a look. We see indeed that just a bit more than 1/3 of our audience represents the national level at the EU level. In a way, that's not a big surprise, of course, but it's also nice to see that we do have a few representatives from outside the EU, partly covered also by your report, of course, which is not limited to the EU. And we have quite a few people actually from academia and also other. We don't know exactly where the other come from. If you want, you can also enter some more background information in the chat if you want. And at the same time, that also gives me the opportunity to invite you to ask questions in the Q&A. You can ask questions to our panelists who can see those questions, and the other attendees in our webinar can actually also upvote those questions. So we try to make it as interactive as possible. But we also do have a follow-up question, which I'm about to launch now, basically. And that is about the national urban policies, actually. And the question here is, and I will show it now at the same time, does your country have a national urban policy in place? Here, there are different answers possible. We have an urban policy in place and it is well implemented. It has just been established, not yet implemented. We plan to have one, but we don't have one yet. We do not plan to have an NUP, or an answer that might also be possible. I simply don't know. Perhaps a bit more difficult. I see that people are indeed still voting. And this, I think, will be interesting to see, Aziza, what the results are. Let us just wait a bit more. Apparently, it's a bit more difficult question than the previous one, but almost 70% has now voted. I'll wait a few more seconds, then you would have had 1 full minute to answer that question. And I'll end in 3 seconds from now. 3, 2, 1, and here we go. What do we see? We see that indeed over 1/3 of our audience lives in a country with a NUP in place, and 22%. So in all, we have 28 participants living in a country with a national urban policy, and 5, which is 10% of the attendees at the moment, are planning to establish an urban policy. 12% does not have an urban policy in place, and 20%, which is 10 people, do not really know if they have an urban policy, yes or no. That means that, well, we have a bit of work to do today, and that's exactly what we're going to do. And with that, I would like to briefly introduce our panelists and then hand over to Aziza. We have indeed distinguished experts working in the field of national urban policy, starting with Timon Buchholz, who is the deputy head of the urban policy unit at the German Ministry of the Interior, Building and Communities. We have Eduardo de Santiago Rodriguez, who is the technical advisor at the Spanish Ministry for Transport, Mobility and Urban Agenda. As far as I know, it's the only ministry with urban agenda in its name. That's quite exclusive. And we're very happy that Eduardo, who is one of the masterminds behind this plan, is willing to present that. Then we have another very special guest, which is Karen van Danzig, who is not just working at the Dutch ministry, but she is actually the urban envoy. And in a way, the sort of mother of the urban agenda for the EU, which was the initiative taken during the Dutch presidency in 2016, as mentioned by Sabrina Abdi in her introduction. We also have Marie Zezulkova, who is the director for regional policy at the Czech Ministry for Regional Development, updating its national urban policy. We had originally on the program also Daniel Balinsky, but we still need to see if he will actually join or not. We're trying to get in touch with him. And with that, Aziza, I would like to hand over to you to start the first round of discussion, which will set the scene for this afternoon discussion. So I'll hand over to you, Aziza, and then I'll take over a bit later.
Great. Thank you very much, Martin. And it's actually very good to see we have the right target audience with a big chunk of the participants coming from national governments. This is where a lot of the policy best practice sharing can materialize, but also some local and regional governments representatives, EU or not EU related. And so I hope this will lead to a very fruitful discussion. So we'll get into the first round. As Martin and Sabrina introduced, we'll have 3 rounds with the panelists. This first one is very much about setting the scene and zooming into the Leipzig Charter and what it tells us about the potential to raise the profile of national urban policies, some of the headaches also that needs to be sorted out in different countries to make the most of those policy frameworks in place, some of the inspiration that they can provide for the good 30% of the audience that has either an incipient national urban policy or no national urban policy in place. And just for the background, we'll have then a second round that is very much on the black box of national urban policy, what it is, how it works, and the last one that will be a sort of forward-looking perspective. So we have a good 20-25 minutes for this first round, and I will turn first to you, to Tilman. Thank you very much for being with us. As Martin said, Deputy Head of Unit for Urban Policy within the German Ministry of the Interior, Building and Community. And the question I'd like to ask you, given your very important role during the German presidency in shaping basically the new Leipzig Charter, is whether you can share with us briefly, to educate all of us in the webinar today, the main highlights that come from the Charter from a substantive standpoint, and how you believe that this Charter and the guidance that it's providing can help strengthen national urban policies in the European Union and perhaps even beyond. So if you could, in these 5-7 minutes, give us some of the takeaways of the content of the Charter and what you think this brings to strengthen these urban policies in the EU.
Yeah, thank you very much, Aziza. Mr. State Secretary, dear colleagues, good afternoon to everyone. So indeed, I would like to briefly present some key messages of the new Leipzig Charter, and I also had a look into the participants here, the list of participants, and indeed there might be some participants that are not that familiar with the new Leipzig Charter as we are here in our circle. And I would also elaborate a little bit on the role of national urban policies when it comes to the implementation of the principles of the new Leipzig Charter and relationship between them. So as it was already mentioned, the new Leipzig Charter was adopted last year under German Council presidency. So it's still quite a fresh document. It's a strategic reference document for integrated urban development for the, let's say, next 10 years. Roundabout. And the full title, and that was mentioned as well, is the Transformative Power of Cities for the Common Good. And this idea of the common good, that's a real novelty in this charter compared to other major documents. And you can read it throughout the whole document. The charter focuses on 5 key principles of good urban governance. And one of this is this urban policy for the common good. And this means that services and infrastructure should be accessible and affordable for all parts of our society, especially the most vulnerable groups. And in the end, it is about a very strong, a powerful role of local authorities to balance public and private interests, also with market mechanisms, as the Leipzig Charter says. So local authorities should be at the steering wheel of infrastructure, networks, services to ensure the common good. And this is highly relevant, especially in policy fields like strategic land policy, land use planning, also the active shaping of the digitalization. And other key principles were already mentioned today. They had also been included in the Leipzig Charter of 2007, the predecessor document, like the integrated approach or participation or multi-level governance. And then the new Leipzig Charter also highlights these famous 3 dimensions of the European city. That was mentioned as well today here, the just city, the green city, the inclusive city, and the structures also this whole week here and all the sessions of this week here. And digitalization, again, it's a cross-cutting issue that affects all of these dimensions on this way to the transformation of our cities. And as we speak about integrated development, then it's clear that all 3 dimensions should not be seen as silos, but with a lot of interconnections between them and between these 3 cities. And this is certainly always the biggest challenge on all levels when we deal with integrated development. And what makes this charter really so unique is that it does not stop at describing general principles, but it very clearly states that cities need support when it comes to implementing these principles and this vision of sustainable and resilient cities. And so cities cannot be left alone. They have to be empowered concerning legal frameworks. They need financial incentives and skilled staff. And here it is where national urban policies come into play. And the ministers who signed the charter commit indeed themselves to establish or continue strong national urban policies. And we have seen in the poll that we have already many member states or national states which already have a national urban policy, but there are still also in other countries a lot of things to do. And this is also in line with the appeal of the new urban agenda of UN Habitat that was mentioned as well. And key elements of these national urban policies are it's a multi-level platform for exchange, it's about financial incentives, and it's about space for innovation and experimentation. And these characteristics of national urban policies are already were informed certainly also the new Leipzig Charter, like in our national urban policy in Germany, that was established already in 2007, and building on lessons learned had always been our focus. For instance, when we regularly evaluated the Leipzig Charter of 2007. We did 5 years after the Charter, 10 years after the Charter, and every time we looked very much into national urban policies in the member states and also beyond member states. And it's also the other way around, of course. The new Leipzig Charter is meant to inspire national urban policies. And for us in Germany, for instance, the Charter is an excellent confirmation of our national urban policy and a good reason to set a special focus on the common good and on resilience. And it's also very good to have a strong argument when we always have to defend our budget for national urban policy. Then it's good to have this European commitment that we can refer to. We all know that there are also other processes that inspire national urban policies. It has been mentioned, the urban agenda for the EU, of course. And in Spain, indeed, the title is Spanish Urban Agenda, and Eduardo will tell us more about that. So we really see that there is a window of opportunity for national urban policies in Europe, with the new Leipzig Charter going along with the urban agenda, the new urban agenda, and of course also with these radically changing circumstances we face, the long-term effects of the pandemic and the climate crisis as well. And I think also formats like this here, this week here, and the launching of the global state of the National Urban Policies Report by OECD are excellent opportunities. I think these are some some messages I would like to bring forward here, and perhaps later on I can also refer a little bit about what we do with regard to cooperation outside Europe, because that's another important issue from our point of view. At the moment, we focus very much on an awareness-raising campaign on the New Leipzig Charter within Germany. We inform our local authorities. We do a series of seminars, conferences, and a lot of web-based activities. So there's a full bunch of activities that we conduct at the moment in the framework of our National Urban Development Policy as a response to the New Leipzig Charter. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you very much, Tilman. I liked your emphasis on the common good and how the Charter can align the planets for that shared responsibility. It's not only something that should be shaped from the national level and then be implemented, but also fed through more place-based concerns and specificities, and how basically this can be also a vehicle for trade-off management. I mean, and we know this push for green, inclusive, productive cities may lead to contradictory objectives, and some of these trade-offs may be managed through national urban policy. Good to hear also the concrete commitment that signatories are making in terms of providing the support, whether it's of a legal framework nature or more capacity and funding. Over to you, Martin, for our next panelist.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aziza. What you said just now about the importance of finding the right balance between these different aspects of the Leipzig Charter is a key element also of this new Leipzig Charter, as it was already, by the way, in the first Leipzig Charter, 2007. Since then, indeed, many policymakers throughout Europe, but also elsewhere, I mean, same would apply also for the new urban agenda from the UN level, as a policy document, reiterating the importance of what we call the integrated approach. And with that, Eduardo, I would like to ask you a question, indeed. But first, perhaps you should also explain to us why, indeed, your government decided to name your ministry by including this term urban agenda. This must have had a specific significance, and I would say a very strong political message also at the Spanish level. And then indeed, I would like to ask you to elaborate a bit more on the way your Spanish national urban agenda, your Agenda Urbana Española, actually brings in this balance, this integrated approach between the different, what we called in the Leipzig Charter, dimensions of the city, the just, the green, and the productive aspects of the city, and how a national urban policy can actually add value to policies in a country which is also so strongly regionalized from a political point of view, as is your country, Spain. With that said, Eduardo, I would like to give you the floor. If you manage to find the unmute button, of course, yeah, which is, okay. Yeah, okay, wonderful. Go ahead, please.
Thank you for the question. Regarding the name of the ministry, it was, of course, to show the political importance given to the urban agenda. Also, there's another ministry which has included in the name the Agenda 2030 to also to show the importance of this agenda too. Regarding your question related to the integrated approach, first let me shortly introduce the Spanish urban agenda. In a nutshell, it is a strategic document of non-regulatory, voluntary character, aligned with the criteria set out in the international agendas, the Agenda 2030, the European Urban Agenda, etc. And it seeks to achieve sustainability in urban development policies, looking for a more equitable, fair, and sustainable development, which are precisely the just, green, and productive dimensions of the new Leipzig Charter. Having these three dimensions in mind, the Spanish urban agenda fosters an integrated approach to urban development. This means a multi-dimensional perspective, cross-sectoral focus, breaking siloed thinking and connected sectoral isolated policies. Focusing on these goals, principles, and values shared with the international agenda, the strategic framework of the Spanish urban agenda can be structured by a set of 10 top-level goals, the Decalogue, as we call it, which on a second stage unfolds into 30 specific goals focused on more detailed aspects. I sent you a presentation. I don't know if Leah or Livia can switch it on. The heading of the strategic framework or these 10 goals Decalogue are, in relation to the green city dimension, we have goal number 3, which is prevention and reduction of climate change impacts and improving resilience in towns and cities. Number 4, which is sustainable management of resources and promotion of the circular economy. And number 5, which is fostering proximity and sustainable mobility. Regarding to the just city dimension, we have goal number 6, enhancing social cohesion and looking for equity, and number 8, ensuring access to housing. And in relation to the productive city, we have goal number 7, which is promoting and encouraging the urban economy. There are also 2 transversal, let me say, spatial goals related to territorial and urban planning instruments. Goal number 1, which is implementing regional and urban planning tools to make a rational use of lands, keeping and protecting natural resources. And number 2, which is avoiding urban sprawl and revitalizing the existing city. These goals are placed at the top of the list, showing the importance given to the spatial or area-based perspective. And finally, there are other 2 transversal, let's say horizontal items, which are also included in the new Leipzig Charter, which are goal number 9, leading and encouraging digital innovation, and number 10, improving intervention instruments and governance. And how do we see the integration of these 10 goals? Considering time and space in the city, the integrated character for us means seeking the right way to organize all time scales. This means the short term, medium term, and long term, and also spatial scales, regional scale, metropolitan, small, medium-sized cities, neighborhood scale, etc. And finally, the conjunction between the 2, time and space. And finally, another strong idea is working horizontally, transversally, trying to break silo policies. We think this is a very important idea, to work together in the administration. And finally, we think that integrated approach is more important today than ever, because in a context where urban challenges are increasingly more complex, where both public and private resources are decreasing, and subsequently there is a need to achieve more with less, it is necessary to struggle to extract full value from each public or private input or resource. There is a need to break down silo-based thinking in order to develop new ways of thinking and working to offer better, more efficient and sustainable services. So integrated approach, we think, offer these possibilities, allowing additional synergetic and multiplying effects to be achieved, while encouraging coordination and avoiding any duplication, conflicts or interference. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Eduardo. It's indeed, I mean, it sounds like a very, let's say, next development phase of the urban agenda by indeed bringing together all the different priorities in a very concrete, action-oriented agenda. I think that is one of the ways indeed to make such a sort of an abstract term like the integrated approach much more tangible. Perhaps we can actually even discuss it in some further detail during the discussion round. But thank you very much for sharing some of the initial thoughts of the urban agenda. We will include your presentation in a follow-up report also, so also for the audience who might be interested in receiving more information on the Spanish urban agenda. With that, Aziza, I'd like to hand over to you again now to ask a question to our other panelists. So please
Thank you very
take over from now.
much. Thank you, Martin. And the next question goes to Marie Zezulkova, Director for Regional Policy within the Czech Ministry of Regional Development. And Marie, actually, we'd like to ask you about this nexus between the Leipzig Charter and the national urban policy approach that you are having within your country. If you can say a bit more on how you are connecting the dots, to say so, and leveraging the opportunities that are provided by your national approach to urban policy and what is called upon under the Charter from a Czech Republic point of view.
So, Aziza, thank you for to give me the floor. Dear colleagues, dear EUKN members, dear representative of OECD, good afternoon. So, seen from a historical perspective, it's been 14 years now since the original Leipzig Charter was approved and signed. Excuse me, can you see me? Can you hear me?
We see you, we hear you crystal clear. All good. Go ahead.
Okay, I can continue because something happened. Okay. So it's been 14 years now since the original Leipzig Charter was approved and signed. On its basis and taking into account other development in urban issue, our ministry had decided to draft their first ever PUPC issued in 2010. In between, the currently valid 2017 version has mirrored progress of yet another 10 years passing. So thus just about now we see the best window of opportunity to make use of the momentum given the new Leipzig Charter being the place the outputs of the urban agenda for the EU mostly delivered, and among other important policy papers, the new territorial agenda 2030. And let's not forget the European Urban Innovation Initiative and the new European EU programming period, which with very convenient timing are in their last stage of development, soon to be ready for implementation. So it's our point of view.
Thank you very much, Mary. It's very good to see, very interesting to see how the first charter back in 2007 already inspired your first ever attempt at shaping this national urban policy, and how basically this new charter has triggered rethinking about how to rejuvenate it, how to update it to make sure it's still fit for the future. And I have to say, we've done work recently on housing with your ministry in the Czech Republic, and we've been really impressed to see how this national urban policy framework is a way to connect the dots between housing and other critical policies, transport and connectivity being one of them, to make sure that we're actually building cities and not just houses. And I think this is probably a good proxy to see how far you've gone in this long-standing effort shaping urban policy. So thank you for that. We'll come back to you in the second round.
Yes.
Over to you, Martin, for the last panelist, and then we'll take a question which I see in the Q&A, and we'll go to round two. And that's a gentle reminder for all of you connected via Zoom to raise your questions via the Q&A. So we have a little pause after Karen's intervention now. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aziza. Indeed, interesting question already there. Thanks for reminding the audience also to enter any more questions in the Q&A. I'd like now to introduce Karen van Danzig, who is the Urban Envoy for the Netherlands, working at the Dutch Ministry of the Interior and Kingdom Relations, which is the ministry responsible for urban policies at the national level. And this is indeed, as you know, Karen, the topic of today. We saw that the new Leipzig Charter makes a strong argument in favor of national urban policies, which was also the case, by the way, already in the new urban agenda adopted in 2016 in Quito, We also know that the urban agenda for the EU, which was the Dutch initiative in 2016, was seen as the European contribution to the implementation both of the new urban agenda, but also of the SDGs to a large extent. I would like to ask you the following question, actually. If we look at the current new Leipzig Charter, it offers a window of opportunity for stronger national urban policies. It has a strong argument in favor of, indeed, national urban policies in place. At the same time, if we look also at the societal challenges, they also call for stronger national urban policies. How do you see the possibility of the new Leipzig Charter and the, let's say, the demand for stronger national urban policies to mutually, let's say, strengthen each other? How can they benefit from what you might call this window of opportunity where these, let's say, societal and political momentums actually come together? I would like to give you the floor for a couple of minutes to answer that question, Karen, please.
I think I'm unmuted now. Everybody can hear me? Okay. Well, thank you for the floor. Well, to answer the question, actually, I wanted to start with a little bit of background information actually on our Dutch or national Dutch policy approach to make it a little bit more concrete in that sense. Well, just to reiterate, the Netherlands is a small and densely populated country with a very rich urban structure. The cities, and in particular the functional urban areas, are very key pillars of the Dutch economy. I think about 80% of the national population lives in cities in the Netherlands. And this structure of cities is very rich and very also polycentric in this sense. And funny enough, we were talking about national urban policy, and we don't have in the Netherlands a very explicit national urban policy frame. With us, it's different. It's integrated within a broader policy. Many departments within the national government, but also levels of other governments and stakeholders are involved, I would say, within the national urban policy. And we are also trying to have the whole civil society more involved within this national urban policy. What we do have is actually more on the physical domain. We have a national spatial and environmental strategy for urban and rural areas. This is quite new in the sense it's been revised, so it's quite new. The focus of this strategy is the improving of the quality of life, which is quite a broad theme, and the strengthening of this spatial economic structure in all areas. So it's not just urban, it's also rural. And in that sense, if you look at our approach, you could say we have like a 3-pillar approach, and you should see them combined within a rural and urban setting. We have very much, we believe in a combination of things. We believe that you have to have the classical sectoral based approach. You should not leave this, but you should continue this. Housing was one of the things that was mentioned. Also, I think you need a special policy also on housing. It's not possible to have good national urban policy without also sectoral policy. The other thing you need is the place-based approach. That's more integrated, it's more multi-level. And we've noticed that there's been a movement from more the physical domain to a combination with economical and social aspects. And very often just addressing the physical side of things will not cut it anymore. I think you need to combine it with economic and social. And we do this through regional agendas, regional programs, action plans, deals. Well, there's many examples, but that's the way we approach the place-based pillar. And as the last one, it's mainly maybe also linked to the urban agenda. It's a way of thematic partnerships and actually innovation. And the thematic partnerships are very similar, I think, to the urban agenda partnerships, but we call them city deals in the Netherlands. We have now 25 ongoing and ended. They've also been evaluated, and now there's going to be a new program that continues with this approach. And within the innovation side, I would say the importance of digitalization is one. And on the physical side, you need the digital twins. I think this is a very important point for the future. And also the smart city approach, I think, is a very important one. And if you now look, actually, the question you asked me, if you look to the connection between the Leipzig Charter, but also the territorial agenda and our policy approach, I mean, if you look at the Leipzig Charter, it highlights the just, the green, and the productive, but also the digitalization. And the territorial agenda focuses on the just and the green. And we would say that all this connects to our priorities in the Netherlands and are very complementary to each other. And if you look at the Leipzig Charter a little bit more closely, we would say it reflects the ambitions and challenges of today. It's like a roadmap, you could almost say, to achieve this future we want together. And it's also clear that we want maybe a different future than the future we have now. We are looking now not solely to economic growth, but we are also looking to a more sustainable and just side of things. We talked about the common good, as Tilman said. And I think by doing this, we are pushing ourselves to a more ambitious outcome, and hopefully also to the benefit of all the citizens that are living within the EU. And the Leipzig Charter consists of principles, preconditions that give substance to this urban development. And it's also it's like also what I mentioned about the national policy. It's also a very integrated, participative approach, place-based approach, which seamlessly, matches our own strategy and policy approach. And if you now look toward the future, I think what I wish for the Leipzig Charter is that it will have more impact, in the sense that we have to bring it to practice. It has to work on the ground. I think the energy and the process toward the sustainable urban development will depend very largely on how the cities themselves see this and how the citizens experience this. And for that, I think you need very active ownership by a lot of different levels of government, stakeholders, and that would increase also the influence, I think, of the Leipzig Charter. And from us, we think the urban agenda and its partnerships could contribute to this. And I was looking back in the past, and I was thinking, well, we used to have the SDGs, or we still have the SDGs, and they started out as ideals. I mean, in the very beginning, they were ideals, but through concrete follow-up, reporting, communication, political commitment, they became also very successful in influencing and determining policy. And that's what I would wish, I think, also for the Leipzig Charter. And in the Netherlands, like Tilman explained, in Germany, we are also trying to increase the knowledge of this Leipzig Charter through very focused sessions with associations of municipalities, provinces. I think we had a session with URBACT in the past. We also have an urban agenda task force. We have the Day of the City. We have policy labs, also one coming up with combined between the Netherlands and Germany. So in that sense, we are trying to put the Leipzig Charter out there and also in practice. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. It's interesting what you said, because indeed the Netherlands was often cited by many others in the past as one of the countries leading national urban policies. Now, I happen to be Dutch myself too, so I know a bit more also about the Dutch situation. But would you agree with me by saying that that in the case of the Netherlands, I mean, we have a sort of perhaps even a next phase of national urban policies where things are not decided top down, but indeed much more approached in a sort of what you could say, a bolder kind of state, where a lot of things have been decentralized also to the cities, to the local and the regional authorities, indeed via different agendas, local city deals and regional city deals, where the local authorities and the regions actually also have a big role to play, and that the role of the national government is more like the body that creates a level playing field for these different actors at the different, let's say, regional and local levels. Would you agree with that? Let's say that statement, that in this case, in the Netherlands, although there is not an explicit national urban policy, it's a change of the way the national the ministry actually, in a way, concretely deals with local and with regional authorities.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you would say next level. I don't know if it's next level, because I think it's also a little bit of a motion going on. Definitely everything that I think that we do in the Netherlands is multi-level. I think it's totally incorporated within our policy development. So in that sense, almost nothing can be done in the Netherlands without each other. So I would say that's like a polder model that used to be, that is, the adaptation from the past. Then when we had to survive this water and create land, we had to do it together. So I think this is a culture also thing. The funny thing is, you're saying it's like next level, everything has to be multi-level, but in that sense, you also see the boundary maybe of this type of working, because I think the funny thing is, if you look at now, we're we just had our elections, we're moving toward the formation of a new cabinet. Well, we hope very fast, maybe September, October, I'm hearing, but okay. But the funny thing is there is a very loud call for more national direction, actually, in the Netherlands. Because of this increasing size and scope of these challenges, and also the scarcity of space, I think we have if you just look at the plans that are actually, on the shelf, we have a shortage of 10% in space, just space, the area we need to do this. And that's not without even the new plans for housing and all these other things. So we have a shortage of space. We have big challenges. We have financial implications. And because of this, it's very difficult to say everybody together, we decide. So you see that national parliament and many also other stakeholders say there should be more national direction. There should be more preconditioning, more frameworking, more performance-based agreements, actually, multi-level, more guidance and more vision. I mean, that's a call that's coming up now. And you see this definitely on things like on climate, on energy transition, on housing. You see this. I don't know where it's going to go. We will see actually within our post-election period how this quarter will fall. But yeah, I don't know. It's a movement. I think we will have a combination of maybe on some areas more direction, in other areas a very equal level playing field and multi-level approach. So we'll see.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much, Karen. It's time, Aziza, I think, to have a look at our questions in the Q&A. I'll hand over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Martin, and thank you, Karen. I think indeed very interesting to see how your approach to urban policy is also embedded in your cultural approach to public policy design and implementation. I think the example that you gave on water security, which is emblematic of this folder approach, has also evolved over time, where we've seen the national government gaining a lot of traction with a Delta commissioner also, and let's say a risk-based approach that no longer relies only on the water boards and very local dynamics. But what I loved also in what you said is what you said about sectoral expertise, and I think that takes us to the question we have in the Q&A, because I always get a bit nervous when I hear we have to break silos. I think silos are also synonymous of capacity, of expertise, of competence, and what you said, that national urban policy doesn't have to dilute the sectoral policies that we need and continue to need, whether it's housing or transport or land use, and that relates to specific communities of practice, is a very interesting point. It's not so much breaking silos, but maybe bridging silos that we are aiming for. There is a question in the Q&A which I'd like to submit to some of you, and then we turn to round two. We're doing good with timing, and again, inviting those of you online to submit more questions in the Q&A. And that's a question that relates to the role of the Leipzig Charter for academia in terms of steering innovation in urban policies. There's someone telling us, Jetse Sibenga, if I pronounce well, that there's a lot also of academics present today, and we know playing a very strong role in advising governments also. And maybe I'll go to you, Tilman, first to see whether you can say a few words about what role academics actually played in shaping this 2.0 version of the charter, if they have, in some of the consultations, or how you see some of the uptake of this charter in that particular field of constituencies. And then if anyone else among the panels wants to respond to that question, just raise your hand and I'll give you the floor. Tilman.
Yeah, thank you very much. Indeed, it's an excellent question, and I can confirm that academia from the very beginning played a major role in writing the New Leipzig Charter, developing this visionary document in this whole process of establishing the New Leipzig Charter. We started with a baseline study, a scientific study on current and future trends of urban development policy in Europe. So it was from the very beginning a very strong focus to include scientists and academia in the whole process. They were always part of this inclusive and consultative process. I mean, our whole, also our national development policy is very much linked to scientific research. We have a dedicated budget for scientific research within our framework. And for instance, when you think of the New Leipzig Charter, there is this quite new notion of the common good. And I think especially there, I see a lot of additional need for scientific research and advice that we need for the future. I mean, we had really intensive discussions on this concept of the common good when we discussed the New Leipzig Charter in Europe, and it was not so easy to agree on that principle in the end, but we are happy that we succeeded. Especially there, I see a lot of potential activity here.
Great, thank you very much, Tilman. So a strong role played from the onset in terms of the baseline and the facts and the data that have enabled basically the design of those high-level guidelines, and also to secure some of the buying that is needed at political level, because this is evidence-based. And I think at the OECD, we pay a lot of attention also to data and evidence-based analysis to guide public action. Point taken. Thank you very much. Anyone else wants to add something about maybe the role academics play in your country to advise you respectively, whether it's in Spain or in the Czech Republic, in the Netherlands, if you wish to say a word, or how you tap into this expertise in your daily work as policymakers? Anyone? Just unmute yourself and say something loud. Otherwise, if no one takes here, yes, Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was thinking, I mean, I think a lot of policy starts with having a good grasp of the facts and the figures and the analysis. And I think that that's one of the reasons that academia and with us also certain institutions and organizations are very important, because that's, I think, if you don't have a common understanding of the facts and figures and the analysis, then it's very difficult to come together and decide and make choices and create policy and actually also implement this policy. So I think, yes, definitely, it's a very important role. Yes.
Good. So let us now turn to the second round. We'll have a bit less time for this one, so I invite all of you to be concise, 2-3 minutes per intervention maximum. And the objective here is really to dive into what a national urban policy is in your different country settings. We've been very vocal at the OECD that you have actually a diversity of approaches to national urban policy among the 160 plus countries we've reviewed with Habitat and Cities Alliance. Some are more or less explicit. The scope, the form, the thematic outreach varies from one country to another. Just to remind everybody, the definition that we have come up with our colleagues from Habitat and Cities Alliance: a coherent set of decisions through a deliberate government-led process of coordinating and relying various actors towards a common vision and goal that will promote transformative, productive, inclusive, and resilient urban development for the long term. With this, I think you embrace the diversity of situations. But I guess the question I'd like to put forward for you all now, if you could respond in 2 minutes each, is how you are appropriating this definition, what role you see in the connection and co-creation with the local level. This is something some of you touched upon already. And most importantly, and in particular in this COVID-19 era, how you can make sure that cities of all sizes can belong to this national urban policy and not just large metropolitan areas, as we've seen happen in this metropolitan century. So maybe we'll go the other way around, and I'll invite you, Karen, to go first, and then I'll switch to Mary, and then Eduardo, and we'll finish with Tilman. 2-3 minutes each. Does this definition speak to you? How do you engage with local in this co-creation, and other items you wish to say on the what component of your national urban policy or national urban approach? Karen?
Thank you. Well, actually, the funny thing is when I read the definition, I got a little stuck on a coherent set of decisions through a deliberate government-led process. In the Netherlands, that I would say that it's not as coherent, and it's not a deliberate government-led. We do help this process, but it's not always led by the government or the central government. If you look at the Netherlands, we are a very decentralized country, or decentralized unitary country. And I think you explained, we have like 12 provinces, 350 municipalities, 21 water boards, 2 metropolitan areas, and many functional areas. And on top of that, we have all these regionalism going on the along the lines of public order, safety, mobility, labor, health. And they're not always congruent, so they don't always match. And as central government, what you do is you create frameworks and preconditions like laws, regulations, funding. However, the provinces in the Netherlands are responsible, because of decentralizations, for the regional and then sometimes economic or regional development, regional economic development, and the municipalities actually for all social and welfare services. So there's a levelness within our country. The interesting part, I think, in the Netherlands, which does not, I know from the OECD, from the studies also, that we as in the Netherlands, the income and the spending autonomy within the Netherlands does not match this framework of the subnational government and the decentralized tasks. Therefore, the subnational governments don't have quite limited financial possibilities. And because of this framework or the structure, we are very mutually dependent on each other. This multi-level, multi-stakeholder approach is necessary, like I said before, for actually all policy and place-based perspectives. And I think that's pretty much the answer. So the definition, I don't know, but yes, we definitely work together with all the levels of government. And like I said in the very beginning, we don't just look at the urban areas or the rural areas, but also the combination of these two. So it has to strengthen all the areas in the Netherlands. And like I said, we also need all the areas in the Netherlands. So that's good. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. I think extremely interesting to see also how you are making this difference between the political decentralization, the administrative decentralization, and the fiscal decentralization, and how anyway in your co-creation process, you have this shared responsibility and dependability among different levels of government, including functional levels of democracy, such as the water boards in your country. Point taken on whether it's government-led or not, and deliberative or not, or whether it's a strategic set of orientations or decisions. I think you bring a very good illustration here. May I turn now maybe to you, Marie, to give us a few insights from the Czech Republic? Does this definition speak to you? How do you work with local, and how about cities of different size?
Yes, thank you. So this definition stresses the ultimate goal The multi-level and multi-stakeholder approach are instrumental to reach what one can imagine behind it. Is also the concentrate permanent action driven by national level and giving appropriate space and roles to the actors from other levels of governance in a country. From Czech Republic point of view, the need for combined action towards a common vision is even stronger given the independent statute of the cities and municipalities. This is inherent in our national principle of urban policies framework. So also only by appropriate outreach and involvement of various stakeholders can this leading urban development document by implemented. We only provide cities and municipalities with support, recommendations, and know-how. The nature of such documents must be perceived concrete enough and easily understandable. Otherwise, the common vision and goals cannot be accomplished. Co-creation and participation by cities of all sizes is what we must bear in mind. On a particular example of the current renewal of the Czech principle of urban policies, only through inviting and relevant actor to participate to the co-creation of principle of urban policies 2022, we will ensure the uptake and appropriation of the policy document. The benefits for all sizes of cities isn't easy to reach, especially due to the very scattered structure of Czech towns and cities. They are about 6,300 independent municipalities in Czech Republic, a country with only 78,000 square kilometers. This is also the reason why cooperation between partners is crucial for us. Our key partners are Union of Towns and Municipalities of the Czech Republic, Association of the Region, Association of Local Governments, etc., and of course also academic sector. So it's our point of view in your question.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mari. Extremely interesting to see the same challenges you have in terms of fragmentation. Although when I bring the 32,000 municipalities in France, we will see that things can go even higher up. But you see this role of the meso institutions, the umbrella networks of cities and regions as really solid partners for you to have this privileged dialogue, and also good to hear the impulse you're giving from the national government in terms of soft support and recommendations and very concrete guidance for your local governments while preserving this subsidiarity principle in shaping bottom-up urban policies. Thank you. Maybe I turn to you now, Eduardo. Insights from Spain on what's your definition, what's your take, how you work in this regional environment with subnational governments in this vision setting, and whether you have any discussions these days on cities of all size and other than large metro areas in this national urban agenda.
Okay, thank you. I agree with the definition in general. For us, urban policy is about having a set of policy actions, about coordination, and about engaging actors and playing a leading role. I very much like the mention you made to co-creation and about engaging the local level. In our case, the Spanish urban agenda, as I said before, is not only a document, but mainly a working method and a process for multi-level governance with all the stakeholders, public and private, involved in cities development. And you may ask me, how is the Spanish urban agenda being implemented? Well, okay, as I said before, it is a voluntary and flexible strategic framework directed to all stakeholders whose activity has an impact on towns and cities. And it is up to each one of these stakeholders to determine how they want or they are able to implement the urban agenda goals, developing their action plans within the scope of their competences. So the key idea is that there is no single formula, no fits all solution. And so the key idea is the action plans. And what is an action plan for us? An action plan for us is a set of action responding to the goals of the Spanish urban agenda agreed by the actors in charge of its implementation after a process of public participation. And there can be action plans at different administrative levels. So we have at national level, we have our own action plan as the ministry responsible for urban policies. But this is just a piece of the whole puzzle. The most important pieces for us are the action plans are at local level, because this is the level closest to the citizens. For the moment, there are several cities currently drafting their first local action plans. And after the summer, we will launch an open call for all cities, providing funding for more than 100 cities to develop their local action plans. So this is our, and of course, this will include small municipalities of 1,000 inhabitants or less to the biggest ones.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you very much, Eduardo. I like your point about the agenda being a means to an end, and somehow what matters the most is not only the final output, but the process that led to the design of the agenda and the building of the trust and confidence with the different stakeholders, and that probably is more likely to secure the implementation afterwards. So the invisible part of the iceberg, and also how you are implementing somehow a sort of flexible rigidity approach. So being rigid on the objectives and outputs of what a quality urban approach should be, but very flexible on the implementation, and how maybe with these funding mechanisms you have, you are also establishing this level playing field to set the incentives for different cities of all size to join the champions. So thank you for that. And last but not least, Tilman, your contribution to that part of the question, and then we'll turn back to you, Martin, for the third round. So if there is any question for any of the four panelists on this content of national urban policy, please raise your questions via the Q&A, and then we hand over to you, Martin. So Tilman, please.
Yeah, thanks. And in general, I can agree to this definition on national urban policies, but I also agree with what Karen said, and then also I'm very much in line with what Eduardo said about the Spanish situation. Indeed, I was a little bit hesitating about this term government-led perspective or government-led process. I think this notion of co-creation is even more important also in our very decentralized system in Germany, with a strong federalism and a strong competence also of the regional level, not only of the local level. So I think when you start a national urban policy, then I think the initial initiative, of course, has to come from the national government. National governments have to be fully committed and take responsibility, no doubt. But then once you get it started, you need to have a very co-creative process. And we in Germany take all decisions within this national urban development policy jointly with the regional and the local level, with the association of cities and towns. So it's always multi-level, it's always co-designing. And we without this strong voice of the cities, of the local level, it wouldn't work, because the local level in the end is a target group of everything that we do. And when it comes about this idea, cities of all sizes, yes, we definitely address cities of all sizes. There often is this impression that our policy, or that we conduct policies for large cities, for metro regions or something like that, but that is definitely not the case. I think we have made it very clear in the new Leipzig Charter that it addresses also small cities in shrinking regions and sparsely populated areas, and also in our national urban development policy, we address small cities. We have a dedicated funding program for small cities in rural areas. The objective is to facilitate cooperation between those cities, to pool resources and infrastructure, and also our very recent call in our national urban development policy on post-corona city. We also included very small cities. We always try to balance the coverage between the big, medium-sized and small cities, and we have a lot of dedicated activities specifically for small cities as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tilman, and very glad to hear about this post-corona city emulation it created indeed to collect on-the-ground experience and successful practices. Over to you, Martin, for the third and last round.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aziza. It is interesting indeed that Tilman Buchholz mentioned the post-corona cities, and that actually is for me also a good starting point for introducing the third round of discussion. As we discussed in the second round also, in the first round with Karen van Danzig, that in the Netherlands, let's say the national urban policy, if you look at, let's say, the level of attention or let's say the political weight of such policies, they show this pattern of a sort of a sine curve. It goes up and down. We've seen that also in different countries, that sometimes there's more attention for national urban policies, and sometimes there's less attention. Sometimes indeed, countries that used to have a strong national urban policy in place step aside from these national urban policies, and I mean the inverse pattern also shows that countries that did not have a national urban policy suddenly also start establishing one and implementing one. This happened in different countries. We saw that. Now, what we also saw was indeed the corona health crisis. And what is interesting, we need to talk about that, I think, also. I mean, and then in relation to national policies, and more specifically to national urban policies, what we saw, of course, following the debates on the coronavirus and the epidemic, is that there was a strong argument in favor of stronger national urban policies, of stronger national policies in general, I should say, and perhaps also to a large extent to the way it impacted cities, because after all, the corona pandemic actually also has a huge impact on cities, on the way we live and work in cities, how we are using shops, retail, online shopping, to what extent we will be working from home, continue working from home, working from offices. I mean, all these different aspects have a big impact also on our cities. Now, combining these two things, I would say, looking at the impact of the corona pandemic, and who knows, I mean, there might be future health crises as well. And we know also there are still some other crises also to tackle, like the climate crisis in general, the issue of social inclusion and exclusion, of course. I mean, these are all big societal challenges that do require at least a set of policy instruments in place, and probably also at the national level. So if we look a bit ahead, and this is a bit of an experiment in our own sort of creative thinking about looking ahead, how do we see the future of national urban policies? This is actually the question I would like to raise in this discussion, looking also back onto the experiments of now already over 1 year of dealing with a corona crisis, but also combining it with the different aspects of the Leipzig Charter. How do we see national urban policies, I would say, in the next 20, 30 years or so? Let's take 2050 as an example. When we talk about, also if we look about, if we think about Europe being a climate neutral continent by that time, I think 2050 is a good timeline. And perhaps indeed, let's do it indeed again in reverse order. I mean, starting with Timon Buchholz. I mean, you're one of the authors of this new Leipzig Charter, implementing, or at least the document that has this strong argument in favor of national urban policies. How do you see the future of national urban policies? If you look at the way, indeed, these huge societal challenges need to be tackled, do they really require a strong national urban policy as an instrument in place? Be it in different ways, I mean, it can be, but perhaps you could focus on your German experiences and the German context to see this. It's a bit of an experiment. Let's take a couple of minutes to reflect a bit on that. How it would look like in 2015, the new Leipzig Charter version 4 or 5 after your, I don't know how many presidency of the Council of the EU.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, let's see how many new Leipzig charters we will have in the future. At the moment, we are happy that we have this new Leipzig Charter of 2020, and I mean, it was very interesting that when this terrible pandemic arrived last year, the new Leipzig Charter was almost finalized, and then we had the discussion: do we have to review this document? Do we have to add certain aspects to this document to respond to this crisis? And we concluded that there was not really a need, because if you follow these principles, especially this principle of the common good, the role of the common good, but also these 3 dimensions of the European city, then our cities are already well equipped to respond to this crisis, or even future crisis that we still don't know. We only added a paragraph on urban resilience, and what is necessary to empower cities to react on crises like this, disruptive external events like this, or continuous crisis like the climate crisis. We also had that discussion in Germany last year. We started this, what I mentioned, these pilot projects on post-corona city to have ideas concerning the long-term vision, what is necessary, and how will our cities look like in 20 years. Especially with regard to green infrastructure, this is the nexus between COVID and the climate crisis, mobility, the role of public spaces, how our inner city areas will look like, because they probably will look like different. So I think we will see many changes, and I hope that in 2050 we will have many national urban policies well established. Mart already mentioned this goal of climate neutrality until 2050. And I think this shift to a carbon-free environment will have enormous impact on our life, our daily life, the way we live, we work, we move, we travel. And radical changes are needed in our cities and in how we organize our cities. Therefore, I think there's this very strong need to steer this urban transformation also via national urban policies. And this will be certainly a major challenge, how to increase the resilience of our cities, how to make them future-proof under really radically changing conditions. Therefore, I'm convinced we need strong urban policies also for the years to come. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Timon. I would say let's move immediately to Eduardo. You have a ministry which has 2030 in its name, the Agenda 2030. Are you conceiving also a possibility of having a ministry with 2050 in its name? And how and what would its task be in that case? Referring to also to national urban policies, of course. Please, floor is yours.
No, thank you. Not for the moment. This is too long. It's very complicated to think so long, but I have two ideas of Spanish writers regarding this. One is Antonio Machado, who was a poet, who said, "Traveler, there is no road. You make your own path as you walk. Traveler, your footprints are the only road." So this means that you have to create your own way to the future. But at the same time, you have to know where you are heading to. Seneca in Roma said that no winds will be good for those ships which do not know to which port they are sailing to. So we need to know where we are going to, and this is very complicated. Of course, in our case, the government has recently created a national foresight office, which we didn't have before, which presented this spring a document called Spain 250 Proposals for a Long-Term Strategy. And this document includes a whole chapter, chapter 6, dedicated to promote a balanced, just and sustainable territorial development. And it includes a long-term vision, but also concrete challenges and goals to achieve, establishing objectives and indicators to measure progress. For example, the decarbonization of the whole building stock by 2050, which is a European objective of the renovation wave. Also objectives, concrete objectives regarding digitalization, fighting urban poverty and inequalities, improving rural areas, provision of housing, etc. We think that a great transformation starts creating a long-term vision and inspiration, but we should also keep an eye on what we are, on our essence. In Spain, we have a very clear urban model, which has been valid for centuries. And we think it will be also valid as an inspiration for the future, which is the Mediterranean city model, which means a compact, dense, complex, medium-sized city with a mix of users, a city that promotes social diversity and facilitates common development and the well-being with vibrant, open public spaces, etc. We believe that these values, which define the genetic code of our Spanish urban model, are still valid as a lighthouse to illuminate our path to the future. So we will continue with this idea. And finally, being concrete regarding the elements of a national urban policy, of course, we don't know which are these elements for the next 30 years. But we believe that these ideas that we have discussed today, multidimensional, transversal, horizontal approaches, multi-level governance, co-creation, thinking global and acting local, combining the short-term with the long-term, and combining spatial skills, all these ideas are here to stay. That maybe the concrete policies will change, but we believe that these ideas will remain and will be there in the next 30 years. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eduardo. Very interesting indeed that you also are developing these future scenarios, models to at least get a bit of an impression of where to go to indeed. Although you might say at the same time that we more or less know, I mean, where to aim at, but at the same time, we still are struggling finding the right way of implementing policies. This is also what's happening in the Netherlands. talking about indeed the future developments in policy making. Karen, I'd like to ask you the next question now. We have a very interesting case in the Netherlands where civil society organizations went to court to have the national government condemned because it is not fully implementing or actually not really respecting even human rights considerations when it comes to taking care of public health in view of climate targets. This political and legal fight takes place against the background of a demand for a stronger directing role of national policies. How do you see this when you are also looking at your urban policy being, and now I'm really addressing you as the Dutch urban envoy, what would be your stance on the role of indeed the guiding role of a minister responsible for the implementation of urban policy, with of course also these climate targets in mind? I see that you're laughing, but I'm very curious to hear an answer as well.
Oh, wow. No, I was just thinking, this is not a question I prepared.
No. It's sometimes good to improvise a bit.
No, you were talking about, actually, I had a really wonderful answer, which I'm still going to give on the other question. But about, in the Netherlands, we had this court case called Urgenda. I think that's what you're referring to, where the Netherlands government was taken to court for not implementing enough climate adaptation and healthy living. And then the central government, especially the one that has to be formed pretty soon, will take this quite seriously. And on top of this, we have our own climate agreement, which is very difficult to achieve at this moment in the Netherlands. And at the same time, we know at about, the 14th of July, there will be a Fit for 55 package, which will come on top of this. And this would mean that the central government, and I think all levels of government, have to step up a little to achieve these goals. So in that sense, I think it's still something that we need to do together. I think all governments have to do together, all levels of government, all stakeholders, because just asking the central government to make this happen, it will not work. The thing we can do, obviously, is provide more of a framework, maybe increase some funding possibilities. But yeah, so I think that's my shortest answer I could say to this. Like I said, I don't know where it's going to go in general in the Netherlands. But we do have goals to achieve, and we have responsibilities to uphold. But actually, I wanted to start with also my vision, or maybe end with my vision. My vision actually starts with the cities and the urban areas with its citizens themselves. So not much with the policy, but I would start with cities and the urban areas and the citizens themselves, and ask myself, what type of city, and the people living there, what type of city do I want? And my answer would be a city that is a driving force for innovation, economic development, a city that is accessible physically, economically, and demographically. Now we're talking about the young and the old. We're talking about a city that's inclusive, that's sustainable, that has equal opportunities for all its citizens, and that is, above all, safe, healthy, and fun. I would add fun. So that is my vision actually for an urban area or a city and its citizens. And then I would turn around and say, what policy do we need to achieve this? I think with that, I will end my little contribution. Thank you.
And what would you say that in that perspective, I will not ask you any very difficult questions anymore. Be relaxed. No, but I just wanted to make sure, if you see, let's say, a sort of a new momentum for national urban policies in that perspective, also in this long-term perspective. How do you see that? I mean, just to make sure that I understand correctly what you were saying.
Yeah, I would just start from what you're trying to achieve first, and then look backwards. And I think in this sense, what the Netherlands has done. And I think this is something you said, maybe it's next level. I don't know. But I think that the integration of having a policy that is multi-level, place-based, in combination with the silos of the sectoral-based policy, and in combination with more innovation and partnerships, I think that those three pillars I was talking about before, I think that's the way forward. Except it's quite complex, and that makes it, I think, for civil servants quite difficult also to achieve, because you're trying to achieve things on different levels with different approaches. And like I said, in the Netherlands, we don't have the physical space for all these wishes. And I think the most difficult thing will be actually the choices that we have to make, because we cannot have everything. We can never have everything. So there has to be choices. And I think also politically, certain periods, there will be more importance, for example, for sustainable and green, and maybe in other periods there will be more importance to maybe the economic side. And so combining them will be actually, I think, the biggest challenge we have for the policy side. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Karen. I would like to ask the audience one more time, if you have any questions. This is your final chance, actually, to enter any questions in the Q&A. I have one more question for you, Marie Sezulkova, also about the future of national urban policies in the Czech Republic. Now, I know that you have just updated your policy in the Czech Republic. Do you indeed count on updating also future editions of the Czech policy, the Czech urban policy, in, let's say, in the years leading up to 2050? I mean, in other words, do you think that also within the Czech context, there is room for a stronger national urban policy in your country? How do you see that?
Yeah, thank you for your question. I completely agree what said just Karen, Tilmand, and Eduardo. And in short, in Czech Republic, it's for me, it's integration, sustainable development, and maybe also functional ecosystem. We certainly hope for cities and regions to develop further in a smart and inclusive way, in line with the new Leipzig Charter. And of course, as that last crisis taught us, we hope we will be able to help the cities and their inhabitants to become more resilient. At the same time, we strive for better integration of policies and instruments, so that there is a coherent support for cities of all sizes in place. This mean avoiding overlaps and having a support environment in place which is easy to navigate for the cities. This concerns both the instrument and policies at the national level and also EU level as well, such as interplay, for example, between the European Urban Initiative, OP, Urbact, and other cohesion programs. So it means, yes, the national urban policies is for the future very important.
Well, thank you, Marie. It was interesting to see also in the OECD report that the attention for national urban policies was actually growing worldwide, right? Aziza, I think that's what you also showcased last Friday. What we see is indeed that there is definitely a strong role also to play for national urban policies. We will be discussing that in the next couple of days. I would like to give you the floor, Aziza, also to sort of briefly reflect a bit on what we just said, and then I will join also with a few other remarks about the follow-up events later this week.
Thank you very much, Martin, and thank you all. Really, it's been a fascinating session, and we've learned so much from those quick but deep dives into the specifics of the 4 countries represented today: Spain, Germany, Netherlands, the Czech Republic, and I think Karen captured the main hot potato that many local and national policymakers are struggling with today when it comes to thinking of the city of tomorrow. I think many of the urban dwellers are probably asking themselves these days, in the post-pandemic or still in the midst of the pandemic, the question of whether they are living in cities because they want to or because they have to. And I think for those of us that have in the past really made the case for the agglomeration benefits that come from this concentration of people and firms in cities, and the productivity and the higher wage that goes with it, we have seen today that if people were in cities just for work and productivity, probably in this teleworking revolution, many would have already left to settle down elsewhere. And I think there's been a very interesting reality check that there are many things, including in terms of services and quality of life, that cities are bringing, even if they come with their agglomeration costs, that generate this choice, let's say, of urban dwellers to settle there. So there may be like some slight relocation in mid-sized cities that are close to still large agglomeration areas, and then can continue to benefit from those agglomerations. But we have seen that really the question now is how policymakers can do the right things and get the things right to make sure that those cities are helping us thrive in the future. And what I could capture to wrap up on my end from the different conversations, I think from this health crisis that is changing urban paradigms, as all pandemics have in the past, is really 3 good news. The first one is because it has shown that maybe although our local and regional governments, based on levels of decentralization, are not always in control of the so-called health box in terms of public spending and investment, I mean, the number of beds and hospitals and nurses and doctors, they are actually very much in charge of the socio-economic and environmental determinants of health. These issues related to housing quality and affordability, air pollution, traffic congestion, urban safety at large. And I think the way we've seen many of the mayors respond to the pandemic in the very short term was really a night opener, in the sense that they're not only implementing nationwide measures related to distancing and lockdowns and so on, but also developing very interesting bottom-up initiatives. That was the good piece of news, the shift from a pure health conversation into one of the determinants of health, where this shared responsibility is very important. The second one was related to planning. For me, it was really enlightening to see how quick fixes were brought with this tactical urbanism that didn't necessarily require lengthy conversations. And to add to Eduardo's 2 quotes, John Lennon was also saying in one of his songs, you know, that life is what happened when you spend your time doing plans. I mean, it doesn't mean it's the end of spatial planning. I think it's been very clear that we need to be forward looking on that front as well. But we've also seen the agility through which this urban acupuncture or tactical urbanism has allowed to really bring very concrete solutions in the short term. And the last point was really the low cost options. I think for a long time, including in OECD countries, there was a heavy emphasis on infrastructure, large scale, gray infrastructure, which is needed to protect ourselves from floods, to have roads, to etc. But I think this shift towards biodiversities, nature positive cities, low cost nature-based solutions is probably for the city of tomorrow opening up an avenue where maybe we don't need to think only about pouring large sums of money, but also minimizing investments needed in city and connecting, including with multi-purpose infrastructure, the different policy areas, and probably their national urban policy has a big role to play. So thank you all so much. It's not the end of of it, we have a background report that we have published with the EUKN that you can access online and that we're going to turn into a policy brief. We're also going to host a session together with Martin and his team in the EU Week of Regions and Cities by the end of the year. And we hope this policy lab can connect with the National Urban Policy Platform of the OECD Habitat and Cities Alliance to have more EU-focused conversations. And Tadashi Matsumoto in my team, who's our brain on national urban policy, will really help us going forward to continue this conversation and dialogue with the EU. So thank you very much. Over to you, Martin, so that we can try not to finish too late. Apologies, I was longer than I wanted to.
But it was very interesting, and I felt tempted also to continue on the reflection, but indeed, there's no time for that anymore. Just perhaps to say one more thing also about the positive aspects of the corona pandemic, and that's indeed that people tried, thanks to, in a way, the lockdown measures, people also rediscovered their own neighborhood. And I think if we talk about indeed place-based policies, I think this was really an eye-opener. I can tell it also from my personal experience. I really rediscovered also the area where I live and the region by walking, by jogging, by taking my bike around. Indeed, because there were no other possibilities for doing any workout. These are also definitely one of the positive aspects of that. This session was only, in a way, the warming up of 3 more sessions that will deal into specific aspects of the new Leipzig Charter. And I will show you on my screen, I will share my screen with you now to show you the other sessions that we're going to do. And not only just that, we will also organize a virtual coffee with the EUKN team this very Thursday. And I suppose that all of you who are in this session already have registered for the session on the just dimension, which will take place tomorrow afternoon, and also the productive session, which will take place Wednesday morning. And then as the last dimension of the city, as part of the new Leipzig Charter, the green dimension, which will take place on Wednesday afternoon. I suppose that you have registered for these sessions. If not, you can still do it by going to the EUKN website. If you want to take part of the virtual coffee that we are offering you as an EUKN team, you can scan this QR code to join us. So with that, we will publish this also on our website. Please take a quick shot of this QR code, and then I will stop sharing my screen by thanking all the panelists for their interesting contributions. Some of you will come back later this week. We have a busy week indeed, all of us, in this EUKN-OECD Week of National Urban Policies. This is not the end of the discussions. We're looking forward to the follow-up discussions. Thank you very much, Aziza, for being the co-moderator of this interesting session. And I wish you all a wonderful afternoon or rest of the day, wherever you are. Thank you very much. And
thank you all.
Bye-bye to all. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Bye. Bye.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.